Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast, joined as always by the great Phil Perry. Today, we're going to get into what to make of the Patriots' triumph against the Philadelphia Eagles. Anything at all against those Screaminis? Next up, did Cam Newton salt away the starting job? Next after that, we're going to talk about whether or not Mac Jones needs to be under a little protective blanket until he's fully gestated and ready to bring out in front of the world. And finally, Phil's final 53. All that and more on Tom Curran's Patriots Talk. We'll get back. Phil, just before we get into the pod, it's been a day for you, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I'm the guy who decided it would be a good idea to drive down to Philadelphia because I don't mind a long drive. I actually like a long drive. Turns out it was a little longer than I was hoping for on the way back.
It's a little bit of a stop and drive.
So there's this place. It's called New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they've just got a lot of people there, a lot of cars, a lot of traffic. So, hey, you live and you learn.
Yeah, I wasn't fully down with the drive down, but it didn't go badly for you. Like I was like on the weekend, you went down on Sunday night, and I'm like, it's going to be shore traffic and city traffic, but it went down okay. But it's just hard. You have to leave at like 2 a.m, 3 a.m. to get through that stuff, go through there. Be that as it may, you'll be happy to know, Phil, that I just took the Mayo cold shower. Came in after I wrote my story today. I went and hit balls for about 40 minutes. I said, I'm going to take the Mayo cold shower and see what it does for me. And I feel enlivened, so enlivened that I'm right now embroiled in a pretty good what's a number one receiver argument on Twitter.
Love that. It's been a while since we've had Tommy on the ones and twos beefing with the people on the Twitter.
Yeah, because we got a guy out here, Jake Thorndike, apparently. I said something about
shout out Jake.
There's really nothing. Here, I'll give you the whole genesis here. Yeah,
I'm not sure we need it. I can kind of.
All right. Well, he's bitching at me. He goes, "This is where you lose me, Tom. Number one wide receiver does matter a lot in this league. We've just have only witnessed 2 seasons of having one in the last 20 years." And I replied to old Jake. I says, "Jake, well, then why, if the concept of a number one receiver matters so much, did the Patriots just complete the most dominant run in NFL history, only having one for 2 seasons?" Many people lined up to say, Brady. Yeah, but Brady had to be thrown to somebody, and he was thrown to a slot, Welker or Edelman. He was thrown to a running back, James White or Kevin Fogg. He was thrown to a tight end, Rob Gronkowski or Aaron Hernandez.
When you say number one receiver, your definition of that is a big outside the numbers fast guy?
Generally speaking, when people say, well, Patriots don't have a 1 or a 2. Yeah, that matters to a team who runs a conventional offense, not a sprinkler offense like the Patriots do, not a ball distribution offense where the back might see the ball 100 times in targets, where the slot might see 140 targets. So if you're having a conventional offense in which the wide receivers are downfield receivers, like the Steelers, right? Like the Steelers.
Okay.
Then the concept of 1, 2, and 3, or even with the Packers, the concept of 1, 2, and 3 matters a lot more than it does in a New England Patriots offense that is so game plan oriented.
You know where I kind of am with the people that are trolling you on Twitter is if their definition of a number one receiver is just a good receiver, meaning like Julian Edelman was never a outside the numbers, big body, right, 6'4" guy that'll run by you, but he was a very talented go-to wide receiver.
Fair.
Yep. I think you do need talent at that position. I don't know if it needs to look like Calvin Johnson.
I agree with you. And I think if push came to shove and I said, well, what do you define as a WR1? It would take 15 minutes. Well, okay. They'd get to number 20 before they mentioned Julian Edelman. We'd go through a Brandon Cooks and we'd go through Will, who's the kid, Fuller. Those guys would all be mentioned before an Edelman. And to me, that's why I would make the contention that receiver is receiver, whether it's slot, third down, back, tight end. If you catch passes, and you're adept at it, I would rather have a bunch of Bs than have an A receiver, 2 C- guys who could just as easily run into the down markers and whatever else. Okay, enough of that. We got a game to get to. Phil, I love sports, and I like talking about them, and we got a lot to chew on right here. First things first, do we grade on a curve what we witnessed in Philadelphia with the Patriots varsity going against the Eagles JV? I say we kind of don't have to start with that when we make our evaluation as to whether or not a guy played well, but it has to be weighed and factored in heavily.
100%. I will read you some names, and these are Eagles starters. Some of these guys are not household names by any means, but Eagles starters defensively last night, I'm looking at it right now, one of their starting corners. We know Darius Slay didn't play. We know Fletcher Cox didn't play. Derek Barnett, Brandon Graham. Steven Nelson was a starting corner. He played 9 snaps. Mm-hmm. Anthony Harris is going to be their starting free safety. He played 9 snaps. Eric Wilson, Alex Singleton, linebackers there. They played a couple of series. Kayvon Wallace, Mr. Creator of the Checkdown King, and now also known as Glitter, I guess, according
to a bad nickname, to be candid.
It's not terrible. For what he's given us in the past, is probably one of his more creative ones. He played 22 snaps. So, you have to grade on a curve, I think, for Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels. And you tell me, Tom, what you think. But I would assume when they're looking at the quarterback performances against this defense, they're doing as best as they can to evaluate in a vacuum. And
it better look like that.
How are they executing our plays and our offense and just trying to take the defense out of it almost?
Yeah, because you look at this, and Scott Zolak said it on the broadcast, this is as good as Cam Newton has looked. The only times I would compare it to would be the Wednesday minicamp practice and last year against Seattle. And in that Seattle game, the Patriots were going against a team that was in the process of allowing 430 yards through the air on average to its first 3 opponents. Cam threw for 397. In this game, the pressure was so non-existent that Cam's mechanics were able to be on point. He was crow hopping into throws, which meant his ability to step up was there. He wasn't stepping in the bucket. He wasn't doing that thing where he tries to throw and he puts his head back so he can get to extra torque on it. Things were on point. They looked good. So 8 for 9 with no pressure and all the time to step up. It's kind of what you should have from an 11-year veteran going against 2s and 3s. Dave Zangaro said, he's our NBC Sports Philly counterpart, that by the second drive, it's almost all third string in there. You got to do that. But he did it.
He did do it. I mean, that's the thing. We got to give him credit for that. I think people, to some extent, have been waiting for Cam Newton to fall on his face. And if he looks like, the Cam Newton from the middle of last season, then as long as Mac Jones can continue on the track he's on, well, then it's going to be his job. But Cam Newton, to his credit, I felt like by the end of the game yesterday, I looked at it, and we're doing these quarterback reports every day, and every day it's who won the day, who won the day, who won the day. And last night would have been one of those days where you might say, no blood, 10-10 round, one of those deals. I think Mac Jones had more impressive moments, but he also had more opportunities to have impressive moments. And so I look at it and I say, you have to grade on a curve. What was interesting to me, Tom, was that even though Cam Newton wasn't running, and Ted Johnson, our buddy, pointed this out on 98.5 The Sports Hub today, but I was looking at it as well. And it does look like that for a handful of Cam Newton's pass plays down the field, they were max protection pass plays. So only 2 receivers out in the route and a ton of blockers there, and they give him that clean pocket. Mm-hmm. Mac Jones ran all kinds of different formations and personnel groupings and spread it out wide, and 2 backs in the backfield and an offensive lineman in there playing tight end and shotgun and 3rd and long and hurry up. And it just felt like we got to see a smorgasbord of types of plays for Mac Jones, whereas because Cam Newton didn't play as much, we didn't get that from him.
Still think that's worth talking about. We're going to get to that a little bit more. I'm going to go through the things that I can take from Cam Newton's performance that I liked. Arm strength, mechanics that were there, a command and decisiveness that we hadn't seen a month ago at the beginning of camp, January 20, the J month, July 28th. Hadn't seen that kind of decisiveness. The plays are rare now when you can see the smoke coming out of his ear holes as he tries to process what he's looking at. And that might be because in some ways he's much more willing to take the checkdowns. The first couple of days of camp, there was a downfield focus, it seemed. Cam has taken the checkdowns. He did take some underneath throws. There's two things about Cam's performance and the confidence. Last thing, the confidence that he seemed to engender. And also he had two good practices in a row. I know he was a check down king on Tuesday, but he didn't have tight ends. He completed underneath. It looked good and looked better than Monday. Two issues that I will mention. One, he had to burn a timeout on the first or second drive, Phil. Something wasn't right and they had to burn a timeout. Can't have that. Secondly, as I wrote earlier this week, it's about every fifth throw that Cam Newton does something that makes you go, oh, what was that? He kind of had that on his fifth throw last night. James White open in the flat out on the right. Cam has to step up, step over. Scurry's out there. And he does one of those overhand short arm throws that almost goes over James White's head. He makes a nice catch. No blood. But again, it shouldn't be that adventurous. So those are the two misgivings I had on him. Philly.
Yep, and that timeout was on the second drive. And so they had a handful of plays going there and it had a little bit of momentum. And I'm not sure what the issue was there. Every once in a while, these preseason games, Tom, even the personnel can get a little funky. I don't know if that was the case. We saw Gunnar Olszewski. I don't know if you could see it on the TV broadcast, but he had to
tweet about it.
Sprint out onto the field late to start the second half. And I think, my understanding is because this happened a few times last year in the regular season. And I started asking around, I'm like, what's the deal with all of these? We saw multiple occasions where the Patriots only had 10 guys on the field defensively. And what I was told is team has certain packages, obviously, for certain situations. And the coaching staff makes that call on the sideline, and everybody who's in there or who hears it goes in. If somebody's hurt or gets injured during that game or something happens to that player during that game that's supposed to be out there, the backup to fill in doesn't always know that guy's still hurt or out. So anyway, the N'Keal Harry injury might have messed with Gunnar Olszewski in that occasion. Anyway, I don't know what the deal was with Cam Newton there. Tom, he played so little. It's hard to say. I mean, you're right. Those are two hiccup plays. And the James White one is an interesting one. And that's one that's an issue that has continued to pop up. We talk about how he's got great velocity, right? But don't you feel like the touch, there are still moments where the touch
got no change up.
It's wonky. It's like Shaq shooting a free throw. Like some of those throws, he's such a big guy. I think it's just hard for him to put touch on that ball.
Yeah. And, when Brady, I talked to him many times about fundamentals because I find it fascinating. Brady always talked about when you throw, you want to have your bicep next to your ear. That's really hard to do, even if you try it in your backyard, to throw completely over the top at all times and bring your bicep near your ear, especially if you played baseball. You're going to be out here, you have an L with your arm and boom. That's where Cam is.
A shoulder pad on, right?
And the more that Cam does that, the more he moves, the more he starts to step left with his left foot, open up, which causes his right side to drop. And it's very hard for him to be accurate. There was a great check down throw to Sony Michel, though, when Cam got grabbed and he still righted himself, kept his feet under him and delivered the ball. Go now to Mac Jones. What I liked about this, and the reason he has less of a curve, is he had greater adversity on him because he was competing with his backups against their backups. It wasn't starters versus backups. It was JV versus JV. Additionally, Mac had more adversity to deal with because there were more occasions where they would dig out plays. 2nd and 13 and 3rd and 13 completions. Also, the most impressive throw in my estimation of the night wasn't just the incompletion to Harry. It was when he was grabbed, had to withstand a little grab, had both hands on the ball, stepped through, ripped it to Gunnar Olszewski. It's good awareness, good velocity, all that stuff. But again, he had a hiccup with game management that you pointed out that I didn't see, that Josh McDaniels had to harp on him for. So Mac, appraisal of him, is it fair to give him less of a curve? And secondarily, is that the kind of thing that McDaniels and Bill will hold against him unless he fixes?
I think it is fair to grade him on a little bit less of a curve because you're right. I mean, he's working with guys that can't go 4 plays without committing a holding penalty. And it's Corey Cunningham and Justin Herron at tackle instead of Trent Brown and Isaiah Wynn. And it's it's Ted Karras, and everybody loves Ted Karras, and he's a very good backup center, and he will be for this team, but it's not David Andrews. Anyway, I agree with you on that front. I really like the throw on 3rd and 13 from his own end zone, Tom. Nate Tice on Twitter pointed out, he does a lot of work on the Athletics podcast, and he is the son of Mike Tice, but he's a quarterback at Wisconsin. And he pointed out on that 3rd and 13 throw, he actually opened up his shoulders a little bit and maybe even used his eyes a little bit, but mostly his shoulders to guide a safety away from the middle of the field so that then he can throw back to the middle to N'Keal Harry and open up a little bit of a throwing lane there for him. I really like the play that you mentioned where it looked like somebody's paw from Philly almost got on the football.
Yep.
And he rips it through with 2 hands and his momentum's moving forward and he can step into that throw. And I thought I listened to the broadcast, must've been the Philly broadcast. The guy almost had a heart attack, it sounded like, based on the velocity that he saw from Mac Jones. He goes, whoa. It was like, somebody had just pulled out a weapon in the middle of the field. Like he was just completely taken aback by it. But he can do that when it's clean around him, Tom, and when he can get his feet under him and he can move towards the target. He has plenty of velocity in those situations. I thought actually another play that I thought maybe exhibited a little bit of arm strength, even better than that one, was he had to throw to Sony Michel going towards the sideline from the opposite hash. It was a pretty long throw. It wasn't long down the field, but it was a long horizontal throw. But it hit Sony Michel in stride, and Michel breaks a tackle, and he ends up getting 19 yards out of it. So there are a lot of little plays, even the play, Tom, where there was another holding call. It was right after the 3rd and 13 completion to Harry, actually, where he had to scramble backwards and sideways, and he was running around like a crazy person for a little while and ends up dumping it off to Sony Michel. But that to me showed, we know he's not an athlete, but he does have a little bit of escapability. He can be a little bit creative in the pocket with his feet. And all of those things I think are positives for the Patriots to check off there.
Yeah. And I think too, when he does scramble and move, he keeps himself in a position to throw. He keeps his shoulders kind of square. So it's not going to be a process when someone does come open for his body to get back around to throw. That was something that Jimmy Garoppolo did pretty well too. And I think that Jimmy thought he did it so well, he would push it sometimes. Be that as it may. Now I want to move on to this. There's a whole lot of looks like Cam locked it up sentiment. And I think that is born out of, hey, he looked good last night. And he's still being treated like a starter in terms of reps, in terms of starts, in terms of get him out of there, you got to protect him. And I think that misses the boat on multiple parts. One that I'll mention that I think Reese might have mentioned it to me on a phone call today, goes, notice that they're not really doing anything with Cam. Like, how come he's not getting a hurry up session? Why are they making it so important that Mac Jones does? Doesn't Cam need that in his second year in the system after a really sketchy 2020? There's other things that I want to look at as well. But Phil, I don't think that we yet have a smoking gun to say this thing's locked up.
I've always kind of looked at the practices after that second preseason game as, okay, if they're going to make a move, or if there's at least going to be a shift in terms of how these quarterbacks are treated, that would be a reasonable place, in my opinion, to do it, because you still have plenty of time before your first game where if you want to start splitting the first team reps more often, which we've seen them do at times with Mac Jones and Cam Newton, but they don't do it every practice. And they certainly didn't do it in the preseason game last night. But if they wanted to start doing that more often, this would be an ideal time to do it, because, Tom, even though there is still time, don't you think they have to make that call relatively soon? Or would Bill Belichick be so dead set on keeping Brian Flores on his toes that he'll say, no, let's go all the way through the joint practices with the Giants and let's keep everything, behind closed doors in terms of what our real plans are at quarterback, and we'll keep Cam as the number one guy, first out in drills, first out in the preseason game. And then come week one, if Mac's ready, then yeah, we'll run him out there. Do you think he would be that set on deception to pull it off that way?
Yes. 100%. I mean, this is a dream come true for him. He has uncertainty at a position that every team knows is vital to game planning. Not only does he have uncertainty, he's got polar opposites at the position. That means you have to, if you're the Dolphins, prepare for a guy who ran it 15 times for 75 yards against you in the opener. And you have to prepare for a guy who can go surgical on your ass, but you haven't seen him play against one, so you don't know what his shortcomings are. So to me, this plays right into Bill Belichick's enigmatic, hard to figure 007 persona. And I think that he would absolutely revel and does revel in the uncertainty that he is hatching with us. I mean, all of this is playing directly into his MO. So the reason I think that Mac Jones, the more we see, the less likely it is for me to say that Cam Newton is starting, is for one simple reason. And it's the tenet of everything that Bill Belichick says. I do what's good for the football team. You have one guy who is a superior thrower, who is more accurate, who gets the team up to the line of scrimmage quicker, throws the ball downfield better. The other guy is a fun, leadership heavy, running, fun guy. Then there it is. So how does that give you, why is that better for the football team? And we're going to get to this part in a second, but this is everything that Bill wants. Keep the other team guessing so that when you do unveil and he trots out on the field against the Miami Dolphins on that Sunday, everyone's going, Belichick did it again. And don't think that Bill Belichick doesn't love people saying, Belichick did it again.
Would it not be best for the football team, though, Tom, to give Mac Jones reps with guys that he may be playing with? If the competition isn't close, and if Bill Belichick wants to leave that door open, and if he's thinking about making that late change, wouldn't he have to acknowledge that, once Mac Jones trots out there week one, and maybe it doesn't go great at times, that, maybe I should have got him a few more reps with Nelson Aguilar.
He's got 2 weeks to do it.
Throw into N'Keal Harry. Is that enough for a rookie who's never seen a snap in the NFL? Of
course, because he's been mixed in so much with these ones, as you've reported diligently on. He's mixed in so liberally with that offensive line. He's handed off and done individual reps with so many of these receivers. He's only going to play better when he's out there with the ones. It's not a question of how well he fits with them. It's a question of him going up against better competition on the other side. So I'd want to see him against the Patriots ones defensively as much as I could. But to me, you have inordinate, because of the preseason schedule, an inordinate, a lot of time to get him out there and get him reps from the period after the Giants game for 2 weeks before Miami. That's a ton of time. It's a ton of practices. There's no reason he has to be out there against the Giants at all.
I would just look at it and say, I know what you're saying. He's still a rookie, and more reps is better than less reps. And I would rather not mess around with having the guy as prepared as possible just to hold out or just to hold on to this one advantage. And granted, you're right. I think it would be a significant advantage. It's hard to prepare for two quarterbacks. It would be hard for the Dolphins to prepare for both guys in two different offenses. I agree with you on those fronts. I just would look at it and say, boy, if you have hindsight come week 1, week 2, week 3, and the rookie is out there and he hasn't had, 300 reps with David Andrews, he's only had 85. Is that enough? I don't know. Maybe it is.
I just think, to me, every case is, this too, and everybody listening does too, because we got a smart listenership. It's on a case-by-case basis. I would never in a million years put Jimmy Garoppolo anywhere near the football field as a rookie to start a game. Not in any way, shape, or form, nor Jarrett Stidham. I mean, Jacoby Brissett got out there in the 3rd and 4th games after the injuries to Garoppolo. He got the horse in the barn in one game and was horrendous in the next. But this is a different player with different players surrounding him. And the way he plays so far is preternaturally gifted. But the other aspect of this is the, right, he's not ready yet attitude. And Mike Lombardi, friend of the pod, former Patriots executive, now does the GM Shuffle podcast. And of course, former Patriots executive. And he has a son, Mick Lombardi, who's a wide receivers coach. Mike had this to say after spending Tuesday watching the Patriots practice down in Philadelphia.
If you're Belichick, do you put Mac in to start the season? And then if Mac struggles and doesn't look good, are you going to bench him? And then how do you get him back again? How do you renew his confidence? You're better off being patient. You're better off letting the crops in the field grow. You're better off letting it have a little bit more time to sink its roots.
All right, Phil, a lot of talk there about roots being established and a lot of worry about what happens if we take him out and then try to put him back in. And the Patriots do invest a fair amount of brain power and energy on worrying about how guys will respond to different pressures of titles. Otherwise, they just name guys defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator. And Bill wouldn't get so hung up on whether or not to give guys titles in the personnel department. The title of starting quarterback, if Bill anointed him this now, I think there is a concern and a worry as to, well, what would that mean for him mentally? And I think in this instance, he has stared down and responded to the competition of dealing with Cam Newton, former MVP. He has stared down the difficulty of having Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick over his shoulder. He's had shit practices and bounced back and had outstanding practices. He's done everything the Patriots have put in front of him, near as I can tell. So put the next thing in front of him, put the most important thing in front of him, and put him on the field, Phil. Stop worrying about him. Stop being a helicopter parent. Cut the apron strings. Let him get on the bus.
That was good passion from you. Really good passion. I was thinking you would try to hit us with a car analogy that would be similar to Mike Lombardi's plant analogy, because you're the king of the car analogies. But Tom, I agree.
Well, it's Bill. That would be Bill or Josh as the driver's ed instructor. They have to sit there with that fake brake. If they don't like it, they're going to tap it. You know what? He passed the test. Send him out there. He's just going to get milk. Sorry.
I agree with you also because he's coming from Alabama. I mean,
you agree with me because you've been saying this since March.
Pretty big program. I've been saying it for a while because listen, I just don't know if he benefits from sitting, because yes, we know the Tom Brady example, and yes, we know the Patrick Mahomes example, and yes, Aaron Rodgers and Phillip Rivers and all of those guys sat and they had great careers, having a great career in Patrick Mahomes' case. There are a lot of guys who sat, and when they got in, they sucked. Whether it's J.P. Losman or Rex Grossman or Jamarcus Russell, or there are plenty of guys that got a lot of time off. Dwayne Haskins is a good recent example. They gave him a whole first half of the season, his rookie season, to sit and learn and hold a clipboard. And he came in and he was trash.
Isn't Joe Burrow a reasonable comp here?
He's a reasonable comp in a lot of different respects, in terms of skill set, in terms of college history, where he was really a one-year wonder at LSU, put up amazing numbers in the SEC, leads his team to a national championship. He's not a physical freak in terms of that position. Yes. And he came in and he thinks his way through the position, and he got hurt, we know. But before that, he was looking like a very solid, as soon as he hit the ground, very solid rookie quarterback who was going to just grow and get better. And I think it's reasonable to assume that Mac Jones will be on a similar track. But Tom, even if he's not, and I don't want to get too big picture here, but just getting an answer at that position is almost more important than winning and losing games right now. Because to me, and you may feel differently, and I'm sure they do feel differently. I'm sure they feel like they can really contend this year. I'm not sure they can, regardless of which quarterback is in there. To me, outside of winning and losing games, if you want to take that and put that as the number one most important thing, and I would understand it if you do, almost as important, if not more, is finding out if you have the guy at quarterback. You're not necessarily married to Mac Jones. The Patriots aren't immune to whiffing at that position. It happens across the NFL. We know it happens every year. And so the sooner you have an answer, the better you can proceed. If he plays great, great. You've answered the most important question your team faces, and you've got the solution for the next 5 to 10 years. If he doesn't, you might have to move on. But the quicker you can move on, the better off your franchise is. And so to me, if you feel he's ready in training camp, and you spent hours and hours and hours and multiple months with the kid now, if you feel he's ready, as you say, let him drive the car. And if it doesn't go well, it doesn't go well. You might have missed. It happens. Then you have to move on. I just think the longer you hold on to him, Tom, and you don't let him go, you're just delaying getting an answer to that question.
And you don't have to quit on him if he goes, strip sack, pick, 3 and out, strip sack, hurt shoulder. I mean, okay. Does that mean you bring him back and say this wasn't what we thought it was? Can I have my money back? No, you stick with him. Put him back out there again. I mean, it's insanity to treat him as if he isn't a guy who's responded to everything that the Patriots have put in front of him, especially when the guy who is behind him, ahead of him, is so deficient at throwing the football. But he looked good against Philly. Yeah, anybody could have. All right, last thing, Phil, you're 53. What'd you do with the wide receiver out of Arizona State? No, I'm not talking about Devin. What was his name again? Who was that kid they took out of Arizona?
Devin Lucien.
It's not Devin Lucien. I'm talking N'Keal Harry. What'd you do with him?
You sound like a Next Pats listener right there with the Devin Lucien drop. At receiver, I've got Nelson Aguilar, I've got Kendrick Bourne, I've got Jacoby Myers, I've got Gunnar Olszewski, I've got Matthew Slater. No N'Keal Harry. But Tom, I don't know why he won't be on the roster. Meaning,
but he just won't.
Before, when I didn't have him on the roster, it was because he was either cut or traded. Now he might be on IR, and he might actually, Tom, he might be on this roster longer than I anticipated because he's on a reserve list somewhere, and you can't trade him, and you have to hold on to him. And who knows, maybe there's an injury to Kendrick Bourne or Jacoby Myers down the line, and maybe they end up needing him. But right now, the way it looks right now, I don't see a role for him on this team, and now he's hurt, and so who knows when he'll be back.
Running back is the other place that is loaded. What are you going to do there with Sony?
I've got 4 backs. I've seen projections where people have 6, but my 4 are Damian Harris, James White, Ramondre Stevenson, and J.J. Taylor. Tom, I have been very
Brandon
impressed.
Bolden's going?
I have Brandon Bolden gone. He didn't play last night. He might be dealing with something physically. He's somebody that you might be able to get by with not being on the 53, but being confident you can bring him back, say week 2, week 3, or whenever he's healthy. I really like what I've seen from Stevenson and Taylor, Tom. I feel like these guys are players. They're just physically very skilled in different ways, but Stevenson and Taylor, they both make guys miss, even though one guy is large and the other guy is minuscule. And I think they could both have roles, which is why I don't feel bad leaving Sony Michel off or having him traded. That's what I would try to do if I'm the Patriots, is try to find a team that would take him, maybe give me a pick in return.
Is Sony Michel an objectively better person at running with the football than Ramondre Stevenson or J.J. Taylor at this point?
I'm sure he's better in certain ways that I'm not equipped to really speak on, like pass protection. Like, I'm sure he understands his responsibilities in some of those spots better than those rookies do. In terms of just running with the football or catching the football, I don't know if he's demonstrably better than Stevenson. Taylor's such a different kind of player.
Yeah, no, I know.
I get that, but Stevenson has really impressed me. He looks like he could play right now as long as he holds on to the ball.
All right. Well, Phil's 53. You can find it right on NBC Sports Boston.com. We got a weekend off. We're going to batten down the hatches down here in Freetown. We're on Long Pond. We got to get the pontoon and the jet ski out of the water and probably take some of the dock down. Phil, you're going to stay loose. It's going to be soggy.
That's kind of sad.
We're just going to pull it up on the beach.
Oh, okay. So they're still live. They're still in play if you get a good day.
Yeah, we'll put it right back on the dock. You guys got to see this thing. We're going to have a huge Patriots Talk podcast next summer blowout out here after the golf tournament karaoke Jeopardy contest. We're going to do that next summer. It's going to be on June 28th, right down here in Freetown. So we'll see you then. Until then, Tom Curran here, signing off.